So the new nerfs and buffs have been announced in patch 20.2.2, so let's just jump into it. The first one we have is Refreshing Springwater going from 4 to 5 cost. I actually like this change a pretty decent amount. Some people were saying that this should refresh less mana crystals, but I think that increasing the cost by 1 does basically the same thing. It's no longer a free draw 2, it's a 1 mana draw 2, and you might not think that that's a big deal, but you can't play at turn 5. In order to make it free, it requires setup, and it reminds me a lot of Cutting Class, which is very similar to Refreshing Springwater in the sense that it can be a very cheap draw 2, but you usually have to wait until around turn 5 to play it. Like Rogue, you need to weapon and set it up to play at turn 5 for free or 1 mana. Warrior, you have the Sword Eater to set up a Refreshing Springwater turn, or a Cutting Class the following turn on turn 5 again, and Refreshing Springwater is very similar. And it also means that it's going to be a little bit clunkier to play. And I think that nerfing Incanter's Flow would have been too harsh, ultimately. I'm not sure if it would have been too harsh, but I think that Incanter's Flow is a little bit more important to the class and, like, eventually bursting them down and doing damage than Refreshing Springwater. But Refreshing Springwater is still extremely important. Next, we go down to First Day of School. First Day of School going from 0 mana, get 2 1 costs, to 1 mana, get 3 cost. And you might not think that this is a big deal, but let me put this into perspective. Paladin used to be trash last year. At the beginning of last year, it was absolute doo-doo. Dog water. And all they did was in Skullomance print this card, and also a little bit later, and also with just this card, it wasn't meta, by the way. And then after this card was released, they also changed the Alder Attendant from a 2 mana 2/3 to the 1 mana 1/3 we know today. And giving that extra consistency on the turn 1 made this deck go from, you know, middle of the pack, maybe kind of low, to probably the most dominant class of the past, like, 8 or so months. And obviously some other things were changed in that patch. It wasn't just that buff, but it was the thing that allowed it to be strong. So not having that early game play, that guaranteed early game 1-drop, is really big. Because yes, you get more resources, but there's still 1-drops. And having a weaker turn 1 because you don't have a guaranteed turn 1 play is pretty bad. And I feel like at this point, I would not even play First Day of School. I would just run like the Argent Squire, right? The 1 mana 1/1 Divine Shield, or an extra 1-drop rather than First Day of School, so that way I could play something turn 1. Because I don't care about resources when I play Paladin. I just need to put tempo on the board, pump it up, and do stuff. So with this nerf basically meaning I don't have a turn 1 play, I actually think that this card will see a lot less play. Because having the extra 1 cost minion doesn't matter too much to me. But then again, maybe I am wrong. Maybe it'll still see a lot of play. Maybe the extra 1 cost is a lot, but I personally don't think it's that big of a deal and would rather just have a 1-drop in the deck now, because I'd rather have that early game tempo. Skipping Hysteria and continuing the topic of early game tempo, Crab Rider is going from a 2 mana 1/4 Rush Wind Fury to a 2 mana Rush Battlecry gain Wind Fury this turn only. And this is a nerf that I was talking about for a long time. I don't know if you guys remember when I said this, but I was making a poll and I was talking on stream about how I would nerf Crab Rider, and essentially a lot of people said that they'd want to make it a 1/3 or increase the mana, but I was saying and I was advocating for making the Wind Fury a Battlecry, because the whole point of this card and what Blizzard used to defend this card was that it was a control tool. Because the Rush Wind Fury allowed you to slow down aggro decks, and they wanted to bring aggro decks, rein them in a little bit. And I was like, okay, then give it Battlecry Wind Fury to trade into a couple of things. Don't give it Wind Fury in total. And apparently not a lot of people really agreed with me on that, but I actually really like this change. It's a unique thing that they've never done before. I like the fact that they're trying something a little bit different, and I'm really excited to see how this nerf plays out, because I think it's going to hurt the deck a lot. Both Paladin a lot, and Warrior a decent amount, but not as much. Now we go to Hysteria. I think this is a more preemptive nerf. After nerfing Paladin and Mage as hard as they did, and even Warrior to some extent, I think that Hysteria would be a little bit too strong, maybe. So making it 4 mana is an okay change, although I'm not super happy about that. And let's just read the dev comment. And 3 mana Hysteria became an option before opponents really had the opportunity to consider how to best interact with it. Pushing Hysteria to 4 mana gives more space for those board committal decisions to occur, and also cheaper removal in Priest or Warlock to have a more distinct purpose. And all I gotta say is I'm not a huge fan of this. I understand why they did it, but I'm not a huge fan of it because it is a preemptive nerf. But like Warlock and Priest before these nerfs came out, obviously not at like high legend. I think top 1000 legend is an entirely different like beast that we have to deal with. But normal legend and below, Priest and Warlock were like the 6th and 7th classes, worst classes. Which makes me think that like this nerf wasn't needed, because even though this card was super strong, the classes were still weak. And obviously this card is really strong and probably like the strongest card or one of the strongest cards in those classes. But without this, how do you deal with early game aggression? Because like, yes, you are nerfing Paladin and Mage, but they're still going to have a pretty decent amount of tempo. And I'm still worried about Hunter. I was saying that Hunter would probably be the strongest class in the game after these nerfs and buffs because, you know, it's not touched at all and it was one of the best classes in the game. It's the only best class that wasn't touched. Like top 3, top 4 class wasn't touched. And I think that, you know, Rogue and Priest need a cheaper Hysteria to deal with the Hunter that is going to dominate the meta. But maybe I'm wrong. And last but not least, we have Mankrik going from a 3-10 to a 3-7. I was talking about this earlier. I was saying like somewhere between a 3-6 and a 3-8 would make sense, with a 3-7 probably being the most reasonable. And that's what it is. It makes it a little bit more manageable to kill rather than being impossible to kill. And I'm glad that I was able to have some fun with it with my Infinite Mankrik deck before the nerf. But even with the nerf, I think that it'll still be a decent card. Like a 3-mana 3-7 that automatically goes face, and is just like a free draw at some point is pretty good. I like it still. It's still going to be a great card. It'll be a little bit worse, but not much. Going down the list of the buffs, let's talk about it. Razorboar, going from a 2-mana 2-2 to a 2-mana 3-2. I like that a lot. It makes it a little bit better of a tempo play. While still keeping a lower HP. So that way, it'll still die and trigger the death rattle. Like, I think a 2-3 would be a little bit clunkier. So that's kind of cool. I like that. I like this buff. Do I think it'll make Death Rattle Demon Hunter meta? No. Unless Demon Hunter gets more buffs, but we're not sure about that yet. We're still scrolling down. Next one is Dark Inquisitor for Priest. Reduce the cost of all corrupt cards in your deck to reduce the cost of all corrupt and corrupted cards in your hand and deck, which isn't a huge change, but will be a little bit effective in some niche situations, which is just nice in general, I guess. The Unbound Elemental is now a decent card. It is now going to be run in Elemental decks, I think. A 3-mana 3-4 that with the potential to get pumped is quite strong. I think that this actually helps Shaman a lot, along with Tidal Surge going to 3 mana, and then the Lilypad Lurker going from a 5-mana 4-5 to a 5-mana 5-6. I now think with these buffs, Elemental Shaman will actually be good. Like, it increases the tempo of Elemental Shaman by a decent amount while reducing the tempo of some of the most aggressive, fast-paced decks in the game with Mage and Paladin, and even Warrior with the Crab Rider. So with those things being nerfed, going down, and these things going up, I think that the increased tempo, they now have 2 5-mana 5-6 elementals. Like, Elemental Shaman's mid-game is going to be insane, and they now more reliably get there, especially with Tidal Surge being reduced in cost as well to be a better removal. So I think Shaman's in a really good spot, at least Elemental Shaman, and my name being like Elemental Core. Really excited about that. Can't wait to try it out. Next, we have Fiendish Circle. 4 mana, or to 3 mana for 4 1/1 imps. This is not bad. This is pretty good. I just think that this card never saw play, and I forgot that this card existed, to be honest. But at 3 mana, 4 1/1 imps is basically a 4/4 stat line for 3 mana, but they are spaced out a little bit, which means that they're easier to remove in general. But since there's so many minions on board, they might not be able to kill all of them, and maybe you can push a couple of damage or get some good trades in. This might push like a Zoolock kind of thing. Not sure yet, but we'll see what happens. But I do like that they're buffing Warlock a little bit. Deck of Chaos going to 5 mana, I think, is still a weak card, but potentially opens the door for some cool game, for some cool, like, decks, because, you know, like I said multiple times before, a lot of the other more aggressive decks were slowed down a little bit. Mage and Paladin were slowed down, which means maybe on average you'll have an extra, maybe 1 turn before you die, and having the extra turn might give Deck of Chaos the perfect opportunity to be good. And then last but not least, well, not last but not least, but second last, we have the Whirling Combatant, 4 mana, 2/6 to a 4 mana, 3/6. Battlecry and Frenzy, deal 1 damage to all other minions. This will help control Warrior a lot, along with this buff, Shield Maiden, making it a 5 mana, 5/5, gain 5 armor. It means it's easier to play. You don't have to wait as long. It's a genuinely, like, good 5-drop to play as opposed to a bad 6-drop. And both of these will bring Control Warrior into the meta a little bit. And then last but not least, we have N'Zoth, going from 10 mana to 9 mana. Zeddy already talked about how he thinks N'Zoth needs a buff because it's pretty bad. And you might think, well, you don't get rushed with this card still, like Zeddy was advocating for. But, big brain moment, if you run the Broomstick, you can play the Broomstick with the extra mana that you'd normally have and use that for some of that extra rush if you end up having an extra slot. It's not always going to work that way, but being able to play it for 9 mana, being able to play it maybe a little bit sooner in some situations will be nice. Having the extra mana for a Broomstick will be nice. And I don't think that it necessarily makes N'Zoth good, but I think it makes N'Zoth playable. And then we go into the Battlegrounds, and I know that Quill Boars have been really broken, so like Quill Boar nerf, Blood Gem, Quill Boar nerf basically, Quill Boar nerf, Quill Boar nerf, Quill Boar nerf, Quill Boar nerf, Quill Boar nerf. Like, actually insane. Another Quill Boar nerf. They basically just went way too far with Quill Boar, to the point where, as a non-Battlegrounds player, I knew how ridiculous it was, because my friends would talk to me about it, how they, like, ruined Hearthstone. They finally done it. They ruined Hearthstone. I'm like, you haven't played Standard, have you? But, yeah, I heard a lot about this Quill Boar stuff. But anyway, I actually like a lot of these changes. Not a huge fan of Hysteria. Don't understand Fiendish Circle at all. It makes really no sense to me. Deck of Chaos, I still don't think it's good enough to be good, but it might see some play. Same with N'Zoth. I don't think it's good, but it's better. And I liked at least a decent number of the nerfs other than the Hysteria one. Hysteria was a little bit weird to me. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.